Arizona Cardinals have a new head coach and former Philadelphia Eagles defensive coordinator, Jonathan Gannon. And who better to talk about him than somebody who has been up close and personal with him the last 2 years he was in Philadelphia. My name is Donnie Druin. Thank you for tuning in to the All Cardinals podcast. Before we get started, go ahead and like, comment, subscribe, all the other good stuff. Go ahead and find our work at allcardinals.com or si.com/NFL/Cardinals. Today, I have a very special guest with me, SI Eagles Today publisher, Ed Kracz. Ed, thank you so much. I know you're an extremely busy guy, especially just getting back to Philly today. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing good, Donnie. A little tired, but I'm recovering. It was a great experience, of course, covering another Super Bowl. But yeah, I'm doing good. Hope you're doing the same.
Thank you so much. And we were talking before we hopped on air of all the phenomenal food places you were able to go to. How did you enjoy the stadium, State Farm Stadium, the entire Super Bowl atmosphere? I mean, what was that like?
It's just great. I mean, it really is. I mean, I was fortunate enough to be there in 2018 when the Eagles beat the Patriots to win that Super Bowl, and great experience. And this was even better because the weather was a lot warmer, obviously, than Minnesota. Love that Arizona weather this time of year, especially. I know it gets up there in the over 100 during the summers, but I mean, you can't beat 40 degrees in the morning, and then it revs up to 70-ish in the afternoon and cools down a little at night. Always blue sky and sun, although it did get a little rainy on, I think it was Monday, but it wasn't, 0 degrees like it was in Minnesota. And the food, like you mentioned, man, really, really good Mexican food out there, which I just gorged on all week. So, yeah, plenty of recommendations if anybody wants to hit me up on Twitter.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, where can people follow you and your work at?
Yeah, well, on Twitter at Kratze, Kracze, or like you at si.com/NFL/Eagles. And you can even email me, ekratz, Kratz at gmail.com. And as long as you're not insulting me, I'm happy to get back to you and give you any recommendations for dining spots if you're in the Phoenix area.
Yeah, you beat me to the punch in terms of weather. I was going to say, while everybody was out here last week for the Super Bowl, gorgeous weather. I mean, Monday through Friday, it's absolutely phenomenal. The moment everybody leaves, it rains, it hails a little bit out here, and it's freezing today. It's a frigid 52, Ed. I don't know how you do it back on the East Coast.
Well, I was a friend of mine actually works at the Arizona Republic, and I had lunch with him. He just got the job back in August. His name's Jason Wolf. He was
okay.
Yeah, he's the one that just broke the big Russell Wilson story about, the foundation that Wilson has. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but he worked on that for several months. But anyway, he told me in his experience, and he just, like I said, moved there this past summer, that no matter what the temperature is, he said it feels like it's 10 degrees cooler from what it is. So if it's 110, it feels like maybe 100. If it's 70, it feels like 60. So I don't know if that's a dry heat thing or what it is, but that was his observation. I thought it was pretty interesting.
Yeah, don't let people lie to you, Ed. Dry heat is, if it's 120 out, it's still 120. Do not let people out here lie to you. It gets extremely hot out here. So I think you picked a perfect time to come. And I think the Eagles picked a perfect time to kind of get their stuff together and make another Super Bowl run. Obviously, you are here to talk about Jonathan Gannon, the new Arizona Cardinals head coach. 36 days to search last. I'm not sure if you were aware of that number, but Gannon, it looks like he was Monty Austinfort's guy from the very beginning, even dating back to last summer. The Cardinals had to wait to interview Gannon until after the Super Bowl with how all the NFL rules are set up. So just give me your general understanding of Jonathan Gannon, what kind of coach he is, what kind of person he is, and how you liked him during your time in Philadelphia with him.
Yeah, listen, I thought he was a great person. First and foremost, he's a young guy, right? 37 years old, but he has a lot of experience. I think this was his 6th different team the Eagles were. Of course, it was his first defensive coordinator's job, but he is very energetic. You'll see when you go into his press conferences. As a coordinator, the coordinator days were usually Tuesday late mornings here in Philadelphia, and he would always begin. He'd walk into the auditorium. Hey, happy Tuesday, everybody. How's everybody doing? Buckle up. Let's go. We're going to get it done. Just really enthusiastic. And I don't think it's an act. I mean, he takes that out onto the practice field with him. And he's the kind of guy that, I don't know how he'll be as a head coach, but he was the kind of coordinator that would, as you're watching practice or as the team is warming up, he'll come over and talk to reporters on the sidelines. and give you some insight onto what is going to be taking place that day. So he's a very transparent guy, and my hope, he'll learn your name, which is always good. The whole connecting thing, but my hope is that, listen, Arizona is kind of I think they're a little bit away from kind of really making a strong push to, get into Super Bowl contention. And my hope is that they give him some time to see the process through, and that they are definitely committed to him and support him, because I think he can do a good job and lead this franchise to where it wants to go, which is where every franchise wants to go, obviously, is a Super Bowl. I think he's got that ability to do it. But just as a person, just a phenomenal person, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you have seen it. There's a video of him walking around the Cardinals facility hours after he got announced as the head coach, and he's walking around clapping up a storm, buckle up, like you said. He embraced Kyler Murray. They had a little moment together, and he's like, let's go, let's go win some football games, this and that. And going from a guy like Cliff Kingsbury to where it wasn't that he was a quiet guy, but he was very much kind of just chilled, laid back a little bit, kind of more himself, to a guy who is going to make it known that he's in the building, that he's in the room, very much so in a positive way. And I think the players are going to attach to that almost from day one. I mean, it feels like, not to put the players coach label on him, but it seemed like the guys really rallied around him in Philadelphia.
Yeah, I think that's the appropriate label. I talked to players, the Eagles players, about he likes to be called JG or Jonathan. He doesn't like John or anything like that, just JG. So I talked to many players about JG and through the course of the season, and they all said the same thing, is that he's going to listen to what you have to say. He'll ask you for your input in the game plan. He won't try to come up with a plan and say, okay, this is how we're going to do it. Okay, this is how it's going to look. He'll ask you, like, do you feel comfortable? Like Hassan Reddick, for instance. He was a guy that was an inside linebacker drafted by the Cardinals, right? And was a bust until he went to the coaching staff and said, hey, can you move me to more of an edge type of a rusher? They did, and his career took off. But he was also used in pass coverage on occasion, because he has that skill set as a former inside linebacker. So Gannon would ask Reddick, like, hey, are you comfortable covering so-and-so, this tight end or this back, and playing in coverage? Now, Gannon used him a lot to rush the passer. Obviously, he had 16 sacks in the regular season, another 3.5 in the playoffs. But there were times when Reddick would drop in the coverage, but it wasn't because Gannon said, hey, you're doing this. He would ask Reddick, like, are you comfortable doing that? And can you do this? If we had you, drop back on this particular play, can you do that against this particular opponent? He asks for the input. Players talked about that all the time. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, the safety who came back and played a little bit of slot cornerback when Avonte Maddox was hurt. JG went to him and said, hey, can you do this? Can you play this kind of coverage? He didn't say, this is the coverage you're playing, and leave it at that. So he is a player's coach. There's no doubt. I mean, he will get players' input, and I think players appreciate that, and players will play for that because they know they've had an impact or an input into the game plan. So, I think you're going to see that. I think guys like Budda Baker and some of the leaders on that defense, they're really going to appreciate having Jonathan Gannon in the building just for that reason alone, is that it's not his way or the highway. It's everybody's way, and you're going to work together to get it done.
Yeah, I think a big thing for Cardinals fans out here was trying to get a guy who can maximize Kyler Murray and the offensive talent on that side of the ball. But also a very big talking point here in the desert, Ed, is what to do with Isaiah Simmons. Is he a safety? Yeah. Is he a nickel? Is he an inside linebacker? So a lot of people are hoping that Gannon, with the previous 2 years experience with Philadelphia, can kind of figure out the best fit for him, because he's one of the better younger defensive weapons. They just need to find a place for him. And the fans, admittedly so, are probably a little hectic and not wanting to trust somebody because of what happened with Hassan Reddick before he went to Carolina, and then before he went to Philadelphia and just turned into this animal that they had kind of opened up the cage freely for them. So to hear that Gannon will take everybody's input and kind of still mold that around his game plan is very, very exciting to hear. Which kind of leads into my next question. How do you feel like the Eagles progressed defensively over the 2-year period that he was there? Because it's not like the Eagles had slouches on the defensive side of the ball, but at the end of the day, you still need somebody to coach that talent and put them in the right position to succeed.
That's right. And, that was a big point of contention last year when this defense was I can't remember if it was in the top 10. If it wasn't, it was just outside the top 10. But, and quarterbacks were completing 70+% of their passes against them. But my thinking all along, or my thought and what I was telling people was, listen, he doesn't really have the personnel to do what he wants to do. And then Howie Roseman, the GM here in Philadelphia, got him that personnel this year, and he knew how to use it. He knew exactly what he wanted. And Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie, the owner, they went out and made it happen. And that's one thing he talked to me about, was he really loved the support that he got in Philadelphia from the front office, from the owner on down to the GM. And he said that, when everybody's working to be on the same page, if someone comes to you and says, hey, I need this, if you player profile somebody, this is what I'm looking for. They went out and got it for him in Philadelphia. And you hope Arizona will do the same thing. But yeah, I think that you made a good point with Isaiah Simmons. Like, what is he? Is he a safety, a linebacker? Where do you play him? I think that's where having a guy like Gannon in the building will come in handy, because he'll talk to Isaiah and see, where do you feel most comfortable? What do you think you can do? And, that might be, look different from game to game, or it could be the same. But you're right. You have to figure out how to deploy your guys. And that's a great case. I think Gannon will be good for him, because he's an open door guy. He's going to talk to Isaiah and see what he likes to do. So, I like that from that perspective. That's a really good point about Simmons.
Now, I do want to bring up Super Bowl 57, I think it is.
Yep.
LVII, Roman numerals. Always a little bit confusing for us guys.
Yep.
So
you almost need an app for that. Isn't there an app for everything else where you can just punch in the Roman numeral into an app and it would spit out whatever that number is?
I think you got $1 million idea. You could probably retire tomorrow, Ed.
Yeah, well, not anymore. It's out there now. People, I'm sure, will jump on it.
I do want to talk to you about the Eagles' performance there. And I apologize, but this is such a big talking point here in Arizona since Gannon was first linked with the job. Obviously, he stayed Monday and Tuesday, interviewed twice with owner Michael Bidwell and Austin Fort before he got the job. A lot of people who are anti-Gannon looked at that Super Bowl and said, how is he going to lead the Cardinals to the promised land if he got or helped get the Eagles to the promised land and kind of put out that performance? Now, but before you give your 2 cents, I would like to acknowledge that was against Andy Reid, one of the most coveted offensive minds known to man. Patrick Mahomes, probably one of the better, more talented quarterbacks that my generation has seen. And just what seemed like an unstoppable Chiefs offense. It almost felt inevitable that those guys were going to get going some point. And on top of that, Jalen Hurts didn't do the Eagles defense any favors by fumbling the ball away and spotting them 7 points as well. So I would love to get your perspective on kind of what really went down in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can ask him that at his introductory press conference, whenever that is, because unfortunately we didn't get a chance to talk to JG after the game. And, obviously 2 days later he's hired. So, we probably won't talk to him again. Now, there'll be texts sent, but whether he gets back, we'll see. But, that's a good question to ask him. I mean, obviously, if you're basing your decision to be the head coach on one game, like the Super Bowl, you're probably doing it wrong. You have to look at the total body of work, which I'm sure Bidwell and Austin Fort did. And it was a good body of work this season. They were number one against the pass. The Eagles were. They only gave up like 170 yards passing all season per game. And they haven't had a pass defense that has led the league in passing pass defense since like 1991, I think it was. So, right there, that speaks volumes. And then it was the second ranked defense overall in the entire league. So if you look at the total body of work, Gannon can coach it up. He can coach. He knows how to game plan. And if you look at that second half against the Chiefs, there were some deficiencies there, no doubt about it. Those 2 easy walk-in touchdowns the Chiefs had off of motion. It would have been nice if they would have had some sort of adjustment for that, because the Jaguars did the same exact thing against them in week 4. But listen, sometimes you have to look at the players too. Were they, did they know what was coming? Did they diagnose it? It's not always scheme. It's not always the D coordinator. Sometimes the players have to take, some accountability there. But I don't think you can blame everything on that Super Bowl and just one half of the Super Bowl. I mean, the first half, Mahomes didn't do much. They got after him. They pressured him. Second half was a different story, and you don't know, did that half-hour halftime affect them in any way? The Chiefs talked about how it energized them. Probably gave Mahomes a little extra time to heal that ankle. But listen, I don't think you can look at one half of football and say, man, he sucks. He's not the guy. You have to look at the totality, and you have to look at what he brings from a schematic point. And being a player's coach, this might be exactly what the Cardinals team needs. Not someone that, like you mentioned, Cliff Kingsbury was sort of quiet. Maybe he was a little more aloof from his players. I don't know, but Gannon's not going to be like that. Gannon's going to be in there. He's going to be with these players, and he's going to make sure they know exactly what they're doing going into a game.
Yeah, that kind of brings me to our last question. That there's been a very concise effort to try to change the culture here in Arizona. I don't think the Cardinals are exactly synonymous with winning football here, but 4-13 obviously is just not going to get the job done, right? They need to make a change. Cliff Kingsbury's gone after 4 years. Jonathan Gannon, I feel like a lot of fans don't like the hire because they don't necessarily know a ton about the name, and that's okay. People with time will eventually learn what kind of guy Jonathan Gannon is, what he's about, all that other good stuff. But the big word in Arizona is leadership. Can whoever is hired bring a certain amount of accountability and leadership to this Cardinals football team in order to turn it around? I mean, the Cardinals have 30 plus free agents coming into free agency. The NFL Combine is in 2 weeks, and Gannon is just, touching into town. They have the number 3 overall pick. There's a lot of leeway for Gannon to put his fingerprints on this club moving forward. My question to you is, I think you've already kind of touched on it before, but in terms of leadership, Gannon's got to be up there, right?
I think so. Just like I said, his approach and his enthusiasm every single day, it's not an act. That's the way he is. And players like him. And like I said, I talked to some players throughout the season, and they all talked about how he likes how he comes to them and says, what is your approach to can you do that? Whatever it is he's asking them to do, can you do this? If not, they'll work on it and they'll tweak it. But first and foremost, people may not have heard of Gannon, or it's not the name that everybody recognizes, but nobody heard of Nick Sirianni either when the Eagles hired him 2 years ago. Even here in Philadelphia, we're like, Sirianni, what? The offensive coordinator for the Colts? I mean, are you kidding? And here we are 2 years later, he's in the Super Bowl. But Howie Roseman gets a lot of credit for building the rosters, of course. And you want to see what I think it's great that Manafort and Gannon are both coming in at the same time, right? So they can work and support one another and, identify the kind of players that they want to use. But from a leadership aspect, I think Gannon's got that in spades. I think that, he'll do a great job leading the players, stuff that you won't even see because it's behind the scenes, and if you're in that locker room and you're talking to these players and you try to flesh out what it is they're doing, then you'll learn what it is. And like I said, Jonathan will talk to you off the record. At least that's what he did as a D coordinator. I would hope he doesn't change as a head coach, but he would kind of explain the way things were going off the record and give you stuff on background. So that's all things that you can deliver to your fan base as you dive into covering JG.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't get the opportunity to really establish a relationship with either Keim or Kingsbury, so definitely hope that the new regime in Arizona, hopefully be a little bit more integrated just in terms of coverage and being able to speak with them, all of the great stuff. Ed, I know you are extremely busy. My guy, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think the next big hire is who's going to be the offensive coordinator, right? Because Gannon's going to run the defense. Now, listen, here in Philadelphia, Nick Sirianni, after maybe 5 games last year, became more of a CEO type head coach. Like, he gave up play calling and he was involved in all 3 phases: offense, defense, special teams. So you wonder if, maybe after a few games, if JG doesn't go that route because of how it worked here in Philadelphia, if maybe he'll just be a CEO and oversee the entire operation rather than just worrying about the defense. So that offensive coordinator job is going to be a big hire. That's the next shoe that has to drop in Arizona, is who's he going to bring in to work with Kyler Murray? I mean, that's the big question now, right? Who's going to be calling the shots on the offensive side of the ball?
Yeah, so I think the rumored name right now is Drew Petzing, the Cleveland Browns tight ends coach. I believe the two worked together while Gannon was in Minnesota with the Vikings there for a little bit. I think if Gannon evolves himself to a CEO type head coach where he does have coordinators like himself and Shane Steichen, I think Cardinals fans probably won't be able to complain too much, but you do never really know. And speaking of which, you got to be a fairly busy guy with both coordinators leaving. I don't know if you heard this around the grapevine, but Vance Joseph apparently is a name to watch for an Eagles DC job.
Yeah, for sure. He's definitely one to watch, but I'm not sure. The Eagles have some good candidates in house. I know their DB coach, Denard Wilson, um, should get a shot. I know a lot of the DBs, James Bradbury, Darius Slay, they all rave about him and how he's helped them develop their games, even as veterans. It looks like the offensive coordinator is probably going to be Brian Johnson, who was an OC at Florida, University of Florida, before he came to Philly, and great friends with Jalen Hurts and the family from their time in Houston when Jalen Hurts was growing up. That's probably going to be the OC. It's an in-house promotion, and I know Vance is getting some love, but it would surprise me if they don't go to Denard Wilson on this one.
Most definitely. Yeah, I think you look at the Eagles and what they've been able to build, both on the field and just within their front office, their coaching tree. There's something definitely special there. So I know a lot of Eagles fans were a bit heartbroken by the Super Bowl loss, but something tells me I think they'll be just all right moving forward. Ed, I cannot thank you enough for your time today. I really do appreciate it. I know you're incredibly busy. I know you just got back from the great state of Arizona here, either last night or today.
Loved Arizona.
Hey, you know what? We will welcome you with open arms whenever you want, my man. Really do appreciate you. One more time, where can people find you and all of your work?
Twitter at Kratze, Kratze, or at si.com/NFL/Eagles. So I appreciate it, Donnie. Thanks a lot for having me on.
No, really appreciate you. And thank you, all of you guys, for tuning in to another edition of the All Cardinals podcast. Go ahead and like, comment, subscribe. Follow me on Twitter at Donnie Druin. Follow my work at si.com/NFL/Cardinals or allcardinals.com. Until next time, Jonathan Gannon is your head coach. Like it or not, he is here to stay. We'll see you guys soon.